The steam from the hot water filled the shower room like a thick fog. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood under the spray, letting the water wash away the grit and exhaustion from 3 weeks in the field. Her muscles ached from the brutal training exercise that had just concluded. The base showers were usually empty at this hour, which was exactly why she chose this time. She had arrived at the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in Coronado just 2 days ago. Nobody here knew who she was yet. The official introduction was scheduled for tomorrow morning at 600 hours. For now, she was just another woman using the facilities, and she preferred it that way. It gave her a chance to observe, to understand the culture of this particular base before she stepped into her new role. Sarah had earned her position through 15 years of relentless dedication, countless missions that would never be discussed outside classified briefings, and a reputation that made seasoned operators respect her judgment. She had led teams through some of the most dangerous territories in the world. She had made split-second decisions that saved lives. She had proven herself in ways that most people could never imagine. But standing here in this shower room with water streaming down her face, she was just a woman taking a shower. The tattoo on her shoulder blade, a trident surrounded by stars, was barely visible through the steam. It was a symbol she had earned, a mark that represented sacrifices and achievements that went far beyond what most people could comprehend. The door to the shower room suddenly burst open. Sarah didn't turn around immediately. She heard footsteps, multiple sets, echoing against the tile floor. Then came the voices, young and cocky, filled with the kind of arrogance that came from recent graduates who thought they knew everything. Well, what do we have here? One voice called out. It belonged to a man who sounded like he was in his mid-20s, probably fresh from Buddhist training. Sarah continued washing, not acknowledging them. She had dealt with situations like this before, though not recently. She knew how to handle herself. "Hey, sweetheart, you lost?" Another voice joined in. This one had a slight southern drawl. "This is a military facility. You can't just wander in here." 3 more men entered the shower area. Sarah could see their shadows through the steam, could hear their boots squeaking on the wet floor. They were forming a loose circle around her shower stall. The shower room had individual stalls, but the design was open at the top and bottom, offering privacy but not complete isolation. "I think she's one of those new civilian contractors," the first voice said. "Probably thought she could use any shower she wanted." Sarah finally turned off the water. She reached for her towel, wrapping it around herself with calm, deliberate movements. Her face remained expressionless, showing neither fear nor anger. She had learned long ago that emotional reactions were often what bullies wanted most. "Ma'am, you need to leave," said a third voice, this one attempting to sound official. "This area is restricted to authorized personnel only." Through the clearing steam, Sarah could now see them more clearly. 5 men, all wearing workout gear, all young enough to be recent graduates. They stood with the posture of men who thought they owned the place, who believed their recent accomplishments made them untouchable. They had that look in their eyes, the one that said they had just completed one of the most difficult training programs in the world, and now considered themselves elite. One of them, a tall blonde with a crew cut, stepped closer. "Did you hear us? You need to get out of here right now before we call security." Sarah looked at each of them in turn, her gaze steady and measuring. She was cataloging details, reading body language, assessing threat levels. It was an automatic process, ingrained through years of training and field experience. None of them appeared to be genuinely threatening, just young and foolish, drunk on their own perceived power. "This is your last warning," the southern voice said, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the MPs." The tallest one crossed his arms over his chest. "You civilians think you can just do whatever you want on our base. This is a military installation. You don't belong here." Sarah picked up her bag, moving with unhurried precision. She pulled out her base identification card, but kept it concealed in her palm. She wasn't ready to reveal it yet. She wanted to see how far they would take this, wanted to understand exactly what kind of environment she was walking into as the new commander. "I'm giving you one chance to walk away," Sarah said quietly. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of authority that made 2 of the men glance at each other uncertainly. The blonde one laughed. "Did you hear that? She's giving us a chance. That's rich." He turned to his companions. "Get the MPs down here. Let them deal with this." Sarah noted his name tape, Patterson. She would remember that. She would remember all of them. "Ma'am, you're trespassing," said another one whose name tape read Rodriguez. "This is a serious offense. You could be arrested." The steam continued to dissipate, and the fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across the tile walls. Sarah stood there, wrapped in her towel, holding her ground. She had faced armed insurgents, had negotiated with hostile forces, had led rescue missions in enemy territory. 5 overzealous recent graduates didn't intimidate her in the slightest, but she was disappointed. This told her something about the culture here, about the attitudes that had been allowed to flourish. It told her that her work as the new commander would be more challenging than she had anticipated. "Last chance," Patterson said, pulling out his own phone. "Leave now, or we're calling this in." Sarah reached for her clothes, still moving with that same deliberate calm. She pulled on her pants, her shirt taking her time. The men watched her, their circle tightening slightly. They were trying to intimidate her with their presence, with their numbers. She finished dressing and finally looked directly at Patterson. "Make the call," she said simply. He blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "What?" I said. "Make the call." "Call the MPs, call security. Call whoever you want." Sarah's voice remained level, almost casual. "In fact, I encourage it." The men exchanged confused glances. This wasn't going the way they had expected. Most civilians would have been flustered, apologetic, rushing to explain themselves. This woman stood before them with the bearing of someone who had absolutely nothing to fear. "You're crazy," muttered Rodriguez. Sarah allowed herself the smallest smile. "Maybe, but I'm also right where I'm supposed to be." She picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder. "Now, are you going to make that call, or are we going to stand here all night?" Patterson's finger hovered over his phone screen, his confidence wavering. Something about this woman's demeanor was throwing him off. Most people would be nervous, defensive, or angry by now. She was none of these things. She just stood there waiting, as if she had all the time in the world. "Fine," he finally said, pressing the call button. "Don't say we didn't warn you." While they waited, the tension in the shower room grew thicker than the steam had been. The other men shifted on their feet, suddenly less certain of themselves. Sarah noticed one of them, a shorter man with dark hair and a name tape that read Chen, studying her more carefully. His eyes had moved to her hands, to the way she held herself, to the small scars visible on her forearms. "How long have you been on base?" Chen asked, his tone less aggressive than the others. "Long enough," Sarah replied. "That's not an answer," Patterson snapped. Sarah looked at him with an expression that made him take an involuntary step backward. It wasn't a threatening look exactly, but it carried weight. It was the look of someone who had seen things, done things, survived things that would break most people. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Multiple sets moving quickly. The door swung open and 2 military police officers entered, followed by someone Sarah recognized immediately. Master Chief Thomas Reeves, one of the most respected senior enlisted men in naval special warfare. His eyes widened when he saw Sarah and his jaw tightened. "What's the situation here?" the lead MP asked, a woman with sergeant stripes. Patterson stepped forward eagerly. "We found this civilian in the showers. She refused to leave when we told her this area was restricted." The MP sergeant looked at Sarah, then at Master Chief Reeves, whose expression had gone from surprise to something that looked like suppressed anger. But his anger wasn't directed at Sarah. "Ma'am," the sergeant said to Sarah, "can I see your identification?" Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out her military ID card, along with her special warfare insignia card. She handed them both to the sergeant, who examined them carefully. The MP's eyes widened as she read the cards. She straightened up immediately, her entire demeanor changing. "I apologize, ma'am. There seems to have been a misunderstanding." Patterson frowned. "What kind of misunderstanding?" "She's a civilian. That's Lieutenant Commander Mitchell." Master Chief Reeves cut him off, his voice hard as granite. "Your new commanding officer, who arrived on base 2 days ago for pre-assignment reconnaissance before her official assumption of command tomorrow morning." The color drained from Patterson's face. Rodriguez closed his eyes and muttered something under his breath. The other 3 men stood frozen, looking like they wanted the floor to open up and swallow them. Sarah took her ID cards back from the sergeant and tucked them away. "Thank you, Sergeant." "Master Chief Reeves." "Ma'am," Reeves said, snapping to attention. The MPs followed suit. Sarah turned to the 5 men who had confronted her. They looked like they were preparing for the end of the world. Patterson's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "At ease," Sarah said to the MPs and Reeves, though her eyes never left the 5 younger men. "Sergeant, Master Chief, thank you for responding." However, I don't believe there's been any violation of protocol here that requires official action. The MP sergeant looked surprised. Ma'am? These men were doing their job as they understood it, Sarah continued. They believed an unauthorized person was using restricted facilities. While their approach could use some refinement, their intention to protect the integrity of this base is noted. Patterson finally found his voice. Commander, We didn't know. We thought, Sarah held up her hand, silencing him. You thought you were protecting your base. I understand that. What concerns me more is the assumption that any woman found in this facility must be lost, confused, or trespassing. She paused, letting her words sink in. That's a mindset we need to address. Master Chief Reeves nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. However, Sarah's voice took on a sharper edge. Surrounding someone in a shower room, regardless of who you think they are, is never appropriate conduct. If you genuinely believed I was an unauthorized person, the correct procedure would have been to maintain a respectful distance and immediately contact security. What you did instead could be construed as harassment or intimidation. Ma'am, we never meant, Rodriguez started. Intent doesn't erase impact. Sarah cut him off. You five need to think about how your actions affected the situation. Think about what you did, why you did it, and what the right course of action should have been. The five men stood at attention now, though no one had ordered them to. It was an instinctive response to being addressed by a superior officer. Tomorrow morning at 0600 you will report to my office, Sarah continued. We're going to have a detailed conversation about professional conduct, appropriate responses to perceived security threats, and the expectations I have for everyone under my command. Understood? Yes, ma'am. They responded in unison. Sarah looked at each of them again, her gaze lingering on Patterson. I want to be clear about something. I don't believe in humiliation or public punishment unless absolutely necessary. What happened here tonight will not go on your records unless similar behavior continues. This is your opportunity to learn and grow. I suggest you take it seriously. Yes, ma'am, Patterson said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dismissed, Sarah said. The five men filed out quickly, their heads down. The shower room suddenly felt much larger with just Sarah, the two MPs, and Master Chief Reeves remaining. The MP sergeant cleared her throat. Ma'am, if you need us to file a report, that won't be necessary, Sergeant, Sarah said. But I appreciate your professionalism in responding to the call. Yes, ma'am. The sergeant and her partner saluted and left. Master Chief Reeves waited until they were alone before speaking. Commander, I apologize. If I had known you were already on base, I would have ensured everyone was informed of your presence. Sarah picked up her bag. It's not your fault, Master Chief, and honestly, this was educational. I learned something important about the culture here tonight. Reeves grimaced. Those boys are usually better than that. Patterson especially. He's one of our top performers from the last Buds class. Top performers can still have blind spots, Sarah said. The question is whether they're willing to recognize and correct them. We'll find out tomorrow morning. Yes, ma'am. Reeves paused. For what it's worth, ma'am, we're glad you're here. This command needs someone with your experience and leadership. Sarah nodded. Thank you, Master Chief. Now I think I've had enough excitement for one evening. I'll see you at 0600. Yes, ma'am. Welcome to Coronado. Sarah walked out of the shower room, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Behind her, the lights in the shower room flickered slightly, as if even the building itself was recovering from the tension of the last 20 minutes. Tomorrow would be interesting. Tomorrow she would officially take command. But tonight had given her valuable insight into the challenges ahead. She thought about those five men, especially Patterson. They weren't bad people. They were young, confident, and had probably never been seriously challenged on their assumptions. That was about to change. Sarah believed in leading by example, but she also believed in accountability. The two weren't mutually exclusive. As she walked back to her temporary quarters, Sarah felt a familiar weight settle onto her shoulders. Command was never easy. It required balancing compassion with discipline, understanding with accountability, patience with action. But she had done it before and she would do it again. Sarah sat at her desk at 0530 hours, 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting. Her office was sparse as she hadn't yet fully moved in. A few boxes stood in the corner, her diploma and commendations waiting to be hung on the walls. The only personal item she had unpacked was a photograph of her SEAL team from her first deployment. 9 faces looked back at the camera, young and determined. 3 of them were no longer alive. The computer screen glowed in the dim morning light. Sarah had spent the last 2 hours reviewing the personnel files of the 5 men she would be meeting shortly. Patterson, Rodriguez, Chen, Miller, and Hayes. All recent BUDIS graduates, all with impressive scores and evaluations. Patterson's file particularly stood out. Top marks in almost every category, recommended for advanced training, multiple commendations from his instructors. Sarah leaned back in her chair, thinking. She had been in Patterson's position once, fresh from training, full of confidence, certain she knew how the world worked. It had taken a hard lesson during her first deployment to humble her, to teach her that excellence in training didn't automatically translate to wisdom in real situations. A knock on the door came at exactly 0600 hours. "Enter," Sarah called. The 5 men filed in, standing at attention in a line before her desk. They were in fresh uniforms, perfectly pressed. Their faces showed a mixture of apprehension and regret. Sarah let the silence stretch for a moment, observing them. "At ease," she finally said. "Sit." There were only 3 chairs in the room. Patterson, Rodriguez, and Chen took them. Miller and Hayes stood at ease behind them. Sarah noticed this without comment. It told her something about the hierarchy within their small group. "Let me start by saying this isn't a punishment session," Sarah began. "What happened last night is done. We can't change it. What we can change is what happens next, how we learn from it and how we move forward." She paused. "But first I want to hear from you. Patterson, tell me what you think you did wrong last night." Patterson swallowed hard. "Ma'am, we approached you inappropriately. We made assumptions based on gender rather than protocol. We failed to verify the situation before taking action, and we created a potentially threatening environment through our numbers and positioning." Sarah nodded. "Good assessment." "Rodriguez?" Rodriguez shifted in his chair. "Ma'am, we let our pride override our judgment. We assumed we knew the situation, and we acted on that assumption without gathering facts first." Chen? "Ma'am, we failed to recognize that someone's presence in an authorized area might mean they have authorization to be there. We jumped to conclusions." Sarah looked at Miller and Hayes. "And you two?" Miller spoke first. "Ma'am, we followed the group without thinking. We should have questioned the approach, should have suggested calling security first rather than confronting you directly." Hayes nodded. "Ma'am, I realize something was wrong when you didn't react the way we expected. Someone truly unauthorized would have been scared or defensive. You were calm. That should have told us we were making a mistake." Sarah stood and walked around her desk, leaning against it so she was closer to them but still in a position of authority. "You've all identified important points. Here's what I want you to understand. Last night wasn't primarily about me. It was about revealing a mindset that exists not just in you, but in many places throughout the military. The assumption that a woman in a certain space must be lost, must need help, must be less capable or less authorized." She crossed her arms. "I've been in special operations for 15 years. I've led teams in combat. I've made decisions that determined whether people lived or died. I've earned every insignia, every qualification, every rank I hold. And yet, even with all that, 5 young men fresh from training assumed I didn't belong somewhere." Patterson looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. "Ma'am, there's no excuse." "You're right, there's no excuse. But there is an explanation, and understanding that explanation is crucial." Sarah moved back behind her desk. "You were taught, probably not explicitly but through culture and example, that women in special operations are rare, that they're exceptions, that they're unusual. All of that is true, but unusual doesn't mean unauthorized. Rare doesn't mean unqualified." She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer. "I'm going to share something with you that isn't widely known. 2 years ago, I led a rescue operation in hostile territory. We were extracting 3 journalists who had been captured by insurgent forces. The mission went south fast. We lost contact with our air support, encountered twice the enemy forces we expected, and had to improvise an extraction route through territory that was supposed to be impassable." The 5 men leaned forward, listening intently. "My team trusted me because I had proven myself over years of operations. They didn't question my orders because they knew I had the experience and judgment to get them home alive. And we did get home, all of us, including the 3 journalists." Sarah closed the folder. "But if my team had approached that mission with the same assumptions you showed last night, If they had doubted my authority or capability based on what they thought a commander should look like, we might not have made it back. She let that sink in for a moment. In special operations, assumptions get people killed. We operate in environments where the cost of being wrong is measured in lives, so we don't make assumptions. We verify, we gather intelligence. We plan based on facts, not on what we think we know. Chen raised his hand slightly. Ma'am, how do we change that mindset? How do we recognize when we're making assumptions? Good question. The first step is awareness. Now that you've experienced the consequences of your assumptions, you're aware. The second step is practicing a different approach. When you encounter a situation that doesn't match your expectations, instead of acting on assumption, ask questions, verify, gather information. Sarah pulled out 5 folders from her desk. Which brings me to your assignment. She handed each man a folder. Inside these folders, you'll find scenarios, real situations that have occurred in special operations environments. Each scenario involves a moment where assumptions were made. Your job is to analyze these scenarios, identify the assumptions, determine what information should have been gathered instead, and propose alternative approaches. You have 1 week. Rodriguez opened his folder and quickly scanned the first page. Ma'am, some of these scenarios resulted in mission failures, and some resulted in mission successes. Your job is to figure out which was which and why. Sarah returned to her chair. This isn't punishment. This is training. You're all top performers. Your instructors believe in your potential. I'm choosing to believe in it too. But potential means nothing if it's not developed with wisdom and self-awareness. Patterson looked up from his folder. Ma'am, why are you giving us this chance? After what we did, you could have written us up, damaged our careers. Sarah considered her answer carefully. Because I believe people can learn and grow. Because writing you up would punish you but might not teach you. And because I remember what it was like to be young and certain I understood everything. She smiled slightly. Someone gave me a chance to learn from my mistakes once. I'm paying that forward. Thank you, ma'am, Patterson said quietly. The others echoed him. Don't thank me yet. This assignment is going to challenge you. It's going to make you uncomfortable. That's the point. Sarah stood, signaling the meeting was ending. You're dismissed. I expect your analyses on my desk in 7 days. And gentlemen, this conversation stays between us. I don't want the rest of the team knowing about last night. You get a clean slate, but only if you earn it. Yes, ma'am. They responded together. As they filed out, Hayes paused at the door. Ma'am, can I ask one question? Go ahead. Why didn't you identify yourself immediately last night? You could have shown your ID right away and ended it. Sarah considered the question. Because I wanted to see how far you would take it. I wanted to understand the culture I was stepping into. And honestly, I wanted to see if any of you would recognize that something wasn't adding up, that your assumptions might be wrong. Hayes nodded slowly. That makes sense, ma'am. Thank you. After they left, Sarah sat alone in her office, watching the sun rise through the window. The first challenge of her command was behind her. Many more would follow. 3 days had passed since the incident in the shower room. Sarah's official assumption of command ceremony had gone smoothly. She stood before the assembled team, accepted the colors from her predecessor, and delivered a speech that emphasized excellence, integrity, and mutual respect. The 5 men from the shower room stood in formation with the others, their faces betraying nothing. Now Sarah found herself in the situation room, surrounded by maps, satellite imagery, and intelligence reports. A potential crisis was developing overseas, and her team was on standby for possible deployment. Master Chief Reeves stood beside her, along with 3 other senior leaders. The situation is fluid, Sarah said, pointing to a location on the map. We have assets in the region, but if this escalates, we need to be ready to move within 6 hours. Lieutenant Commander Jackson, her second-in-command, nodded. I've already alerted the rapid response team. They're conducting equipment checks now. Good. Sarah studied the intel reports. What's our biggest challenge if we deploy? Time and terrain, Reeves answered. The insertion point is surrounded by hostile territory. We'd need perfect coordination with air support. Sarah's mind was already working through scenarios, backup plans, contingencies. This was what she did best. The politics and personnel issues of command were challenging, but this, tactical planning, mission preparation, this was where she excelled. A knock interrupted their planning session. One of the junior officers poked his head in. "Ma'am, sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation in the training area," Master Chief requested. Reeves frowned. "What kind of situation?" "Altercation between trainees, Master Chief. It's under control, but they're asking for command presence." Sarah glanced at Reeves. "Go. I'll finish the briefing here and catch up with you." "Yes, ma'am." Reeves left quickly. 15 minutes later, Sarah was walking across the base when she heard raised voices from the training yard. She changed direction, heading toward the sound. As she rounded the corner, she saw a crowd of about 20 men gathered in a circle. In the center, 2 men faced off, both in fighting stances. One of them was Patterson. Master Chief Reeves was pushing through the crowd. Sarah followed, her command voice cutting through the noise. "Stand down. Everyone step back now." The crowd parted immediately. Patterson and the other man, whom Sarah didn't recognize, lowered their hands but continued glaring at each other. "What's going on here?" Sarah demanded. Reeves had reached the center. "Sir, we've got a disagreement that got physical." Sarah looked at Patterson, then at the other man. He was older, probably in his early 30s, with a scarred face and the weathered look of someone who had seen combat. His name tape read Morrison. "Someone want to explain?" Sarah asked. Morrison spoke first. "No disrespect, ma'am, but this is between me and Patterson. We'll settle it like men." "There's nothing to settle," Patterson said, his jaw tight. "You're wrong and you need to admit it." Sarah held up her hand. "I didn't ask for a continuation of the argument. I asked for an explanation." "Morrison, you first. What's this about?" Morrison hesitated, then said, "We were discussing leadership, ma'am. Patterson here seems to think he knows everything about it after one training cycle. I've been deployed 4 times. I tried to give him some perspective and he got defensive." "That's not what happened," Patterson protested. "You said—" He stopped himself, glancing at Sarah. Sarah caught the look. "What did he say, Patterson?" Patterson's face flushed. "Nothing, ma'am. It's not important. If it was important enough to almost fight over, it's important enough to tell me." Sarah's voice was firm, but not harsh. The tension in the air was palpable. The gathered crowd was silent, waiting. Morrison shifted his weight, suddenly looking uncomfortable. Chen, who was part of the crowd, stepped forward. "Ma'am, Morrison said that women don't belong in Special Operations Command." Patterson disagreed. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt a familiar weariness. This was an old argument, one she had heard countless times in various forms throughout her career. "I see. Morrison, is that accurate?" Morrison straightened up, meeting her eyes. "Ma'am, with respect, I stand by what I said. Special operations require a certain mindset, a certain physical capability. I've seen men break under the pressure. I don't think—" "You don't think what, Morrison? That I can handle command? That I haven't proven myself?" Sarah's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Tell me about your deployments." The question caught Morrison off guard. "Ma'am?" "Your 4 deployments. Tell me about them." "I was in Afghanistan, ma'am. 2 tours in Helmand Province, 1 in Kandahar and 1 in the Pek Valley. I've seen combat, lost friends, earned my stripes the hard way." Sarah nodded. "Respectable service. Thank you for it." She paused. "Now let me tell you about some of my deployments. I've operated in 6 different countries on 3 continents. I've led teams through territory where the enemy had home advantage, superior numbers and knowledge of the terrain. I've made decisions under fire that saved the lives of my team members and mission targets. I've carried wounded soldiers out of kill zones. I've coordinated with air support under conditions that would have grounded most pilots." She stepped closer to Morrison. "I don't need to prove myself to you or anyone else here. My record speaks for itself. But here's what concerns me. You're letting your personal beliefs interfere with the cohesion of this team. When you say women don't belong in command, you're not just insulting me. You're insulting every woman who has served, bled, and died for this country." Morrison's face had gone red. "Ma'am, I didn't mean—" "What you meant doesn't matter as much as what you said and the division it creates." Sarah turned to address the entire group. "Listen up, all of you. I don't care what your personal opinions are about women in the military, about diversity, about social change, or about anything else that doesn't directly relate to our mission. What I care about is this: can you follow orders? Can you work as a team? Can you put aside your personal feelings for the success of the mission?" She let the questions hang in the air. "If you can't do those things, then you don't belong here. Regardless of your combat experience or your training scores, this team succeeds or fails together. There's no room for division based on gender, race, background, or anything else that isn't directly related to competence and character. Patterson spoke up. That's what I was trying to tell him, ma'am. Sarah turned to Patterson. And while I appreciate your defense, getting into a physical confrontation isn't the answer either. If you have a problem with someone's conduct, you bring it to the chain of command. You don't solve it with your fists. Understood? Yes, ma'am, Patterson said, deflating slightly. Sarah looked at Morrison. You have two choices. You can accept that I'm your commanding officer, put aside your personal opinions, and be the professional operator your record says you are. Or you can request a transfer. I won't hold it against you if you choose the latter, but I will not tolerate undermining the command structure while you're here. Which is it going to be? Morrison was silent for a long moment. The entire training yard seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he said, I'll stay, ma'am. That wasn't my question. I asked if you can accept my command and be professional. Another pause. Then Morrison straightened to attention. Yes, ma'am. I can. Good. Then here's what's going to happen. Both you and Patterson are going to report to the gym. You're going to spend the next hour on the mats working together through combat drills. Master Chief Reeves will supervise. You're going to learn to trust each other's capabilities, or at least respect them. And at the end of that hour, this matter is closed. Clear? Yes, ma'am, they said together. The rest of you back to your duties. This isn't a spectator sport. Sarah's command voice scattered the crowd quickly. As people dispersed, Chen approached Sarah. Ma'am, that was well handled. Thank you. Chen, how's your assignment coming? Eye-opening, ma'am. Some of those scenarios are harder to analyze than I expected. That's because real situations are always more complex than training scenarios. Keep working at it. Sarah walked back toward her office, Reeves falling into step beside her. Ma'am, Morrison's a good operator, but he's old school. This might not be the last time we have this conversation. I know, Master Chief, but we need to keep having it until it sinks in. Culture doesn't change overnight. She glanced at him. You've been in special operations for 20 years. What's your honest opinion about women in command? Reeves considered his answer carefully. Ma'am, I've worked with 3 female officers in my career. One of them shouldn't have been in special operations at all. Not because she was a woman, but because she couldn't make hard decisions under pressure. The other 2 were among the best officers I've ever served with. Your gender isn't what makes you a good or bad commander. Your decisions, your leadership, your ability to inspire trust, that's what matters. Sarah nodded. Fair assessment. That's all I ask for. Judge me on my performance, not my chromosomes. Yes, ma'am. For what it's worth, your performance so far has been impressive. Thank you, Master Chief. Now let's get back to that deployment brief. The real world doesn't pause for interpersonal drama. The week passed quickly, filled with briefings, training evaluations, and the endless administrative tasks that came with command. Sarah found herself working 12-hour days, learning the personalities and capabilities of her team, identifying strengths and weaknesses, building relationships with other commanders on base. On the 7th day, exactly as scheduled, the 5 men from the shower room returned to her office. They each carried their completed assignment folders. This time there were enough chairs for everyone. Sit, Sarah said, looking up from her computer. Let's hear what you learned. Patterson went first. He opened his folder and pulled out several pages of handwritten notes. Ma'am, the scenario I analyzed involved a 2012 operation in Yemen. The team leader assumed that the target building would be lightly defended, based on intelligence reports. He didn't verify with updated reconnaissance. The result was that his team walked into an ambush. 2 operators were killed, 3 wounded. What should the team leader have done differently? Sarah asked. He should have insisted on real-time reconnaissance, even if it delayed the operation. He should have questioned why the intelligence was 3 days old. And he should have prepared contingency plans for heavier resistance. Patterson paused. The assumption that led to the disaster was that old intelligence was reliable intelligence. Sarah nodded. Good analysis. Rodriguez? Rodriguez described his scenario. A failed hostage rescue where the commander assumed the hostages were being held in a single location. They actually had been split between 2 buildings. By the time the error was discovered, the hostages in the second location had been moved. Chen's scenario involved cultural assumptions. An operator had assumed that civilian women in a Middle Eastern village would be afraid to help insurgents. In reality, several of them were active participants in planning attacks. The assumption about gender roles in that culture led to intelligence failures. Miller and Hayes presented their analyses, each revealing different types of assumptions that had led to mission complications or failures. By the time they finished, over an hour had passed. Sarah stood and walked to her window, looking out at the training grounds where operators were running drills. "You've all done excellent work. Your analyses show deep thinking and self-reflection. But I want you to take this one step further. I want you to identify a moment in your own lives, in your own training or service, where you made an assumption that turned out to be wrong." The room fell silent. This was uncomfortable territory, asking them to be vulnerable in front of their commanding officer and each other. Finally, Chen spoke. "Ma'am, during boot S, I assumed a guy in my boat crew was weak because he was smaller than the rest of us. I didn't trust him to carry his weight. Turned out he had more endurance than anyone else in the crew. He carried me through Hell Week when I was ready to quit. My assumption almost cost me my goal of becoming a SEAL." Rodriguez went next. "I assumed my girlfriend would wait for me while I was in training. I didn't communicate with her enough, didn't make the effort because I thought our relationship was solid. It wasn't, she left. And I learned that assumptions in relationships are just as dangerous as assumptions in combat." Miller shared a story about assuming a training instructor was incompetent because he was soft-spoken. The instructor ended up being one of the most knowledgeable people Miller had encountered, teaching him techniques that saved his life during a training accident. Hayes admitted he had assumed all officers were out of touch with enlisted concerns. His first platoon commander proved him wrong by being one of the most attentive and caring leaders he had served under. Then it was Patterson's turn. He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. Finally, he looked up at Sarah. "Ma'am, I assumed you were just a civilian because you were a woman in a place where I didn't expect to see a woman. I let my unconscious bias override my judgment. And I'm ashamed of it." "Why are you ashamed?" Sarah asked gently. "Because my mother is a doctor. My sister is studying engineering. I grew up seeing women excel in male-dominated fields. I should have known better. But the moment I saw you in that shower room, all my training and experience went out the window. And I made the same stupid assumptions that men have been making for decades." Patterson's voice was thick with emotion. "I'm ashamed because I know the damage those assumptions cause, and I still made them." Sarah returned to her desk and sat down, facing them. "I appreciate your honesty, all of you. Here's what I want you to understand. Everyone makes assumptions. It's part of being human. Our brains are wired to take shortcuts, to categorize, to predict based on past experience. The question isn't whether you'll make assumptions. The question is whether you'll recognize them and correct them." She pulled out a sheet of paper and began writing. "I'm going to share something personal with you. When I first entered Buds as one of the only women in my class, I assumed everyone would doubt me. I was so focused on proving myself that I didn't ask for help when I needed it. I didn't build the relationships I should have built. My assumption that everyone was against me almost derailed my career before it started." The 5 men leaned forward, listening intently. "One of my instructors pulled me aside after I nearly drowned during a training exercise. I had been too proud to admit I was struggling with a particular swimming technique. He told me something I've never forgotten. He said, 'Mitchell, pride is just another word for assumption. You're assuming you have to do everything alone, that asking for help makes you weak. That assumption is going to get you killed.'" Sarah looked at each of them. He was right. I learned to ask for help, to trust my teammates, to admit when I didn't know something. It made me a better operator and eventually a better leader. So when I see you making assumptions, I don't see bad people. I see people who haven't yet learned the lessons I learned." Patterson wiped his eyes quickly. "Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. This assignment was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, I'm going to challenge every assumption you make. I'm going to push you to question your beliefs, to verify your information, to think beyond the obvious. It's going to be uncomfortable. But it's also going to make you better operators." Rodriguez raised his hand. "Ma'am, can I ask a question?" "Go ahead. Why are you investing so much time in us?" "You could have written us off after that first night." Sarah considered the question. "Because I see potential in you. Because I believe the best leaders are those who learned from their mistakes. And because someone once invested time in me when they didn't have to." She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "Your official assignment is complete. You all passed. But your real education is just beginning." As they stood to leave, Sarah added, "One more thing. Starting Monday, you 5 are going to be working on a special project. You're going to develop a training module on unconscious bias for new SEAL candidates. You're going to research it, design it, and eventually teach it. Questions? The 5 men looked at each other in surprise. Hayes spoke for the group. Ma'am, we're not trained as instructors. Then you'll learn. Teaching is one of the best ways to truly understand something. Sarah smiled slightly. Besides, who better to teach about assumptions and bias than people who experience the consequences firsthand? After they left, Sarah sat alone in her office, feeling the weight of command settling more heavily on her shoulders. She thought about her own instructor, the one who had pulled her aside all those years ago. He had died 3 years later in a training accident, never knowing how profoundly his words had impacted her career. She picked up the photograph from her desk, the one of her first SEAL team. 3 faces looked back at her, frozen in time, never aging. She touched each face gently. I'm paying it forward, she whispered. Just like you taught me. The base was quieting down as evening approached. Through her window, Sarah could see operators finishing their daily training, heading to the mess hall or their quarters. This base, this team, was her responsibility now. Every decision she made would ripple through the lives of these men and women, affecting not just their careers but potentially their survival. The incident in the shower room felt like it had happened months ago, rather than a week ago. So much had changed in such a short time. 5 young men had learned a hard lesson. A prejudiced operator had been challenged. The culture of the unit had been slightly shifted in a new direction. Sarah knew that real change took time. One incident, one conversation, one training module wouldn't transform decades of military culture. But it was a start. And sometimes a start was all you needed. She closed her computer and stood, stretching muscles tight from sitting too long. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to lead, new chances to make a difference. But tonight she would rest, knowing that she had handled her first week of command with integrity and purpose. As she locked her office door, Sarah caught her reflection in the darkened window. She looked tired but satisfied. The woman in the reflection had earned her place here, had fought for it, had sacrificed for it. And she would continue to fight, not just for herself but for every person who served under her command and every person who would come after her. 2 months into her command, Sarah stood in the briefing room at 0300 hours. The call had come in 90 minutes earlier. A maritime vessel carrying American citizens had been hijacked off the coast of Somalia. Intelligence indicated that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Her team had been activated for immediate deployment. The room was packed with operators, intelligence officers, and support personnel. Sarah had spent the last hour absorbing every piece of available information, running scenarios in her mind, calculating risks and probabilities. Now it was time to brief her team. Listen up, she called, and the room fell instantly silent. 90 minutes ago, the cargo vessel Meridian Star was seized by pirates approximately 40 nautical miles off the Somali coast. 23 crew members are on board, including 4 American citizens. The pirates have already made contact demanding ransom. Based on recent patterns, we have approximately 12 hours before the situation becomes critical. She pulled up satellite imagery on the main screen. This is our target. The Meridian Star is a mid-sized cargo vessel, 300 feet long, currently dead in the water. Intelligence indicates 6 to 8 pirates on board, likely armed with AK-47s and RPGs. The crew is believed to be held in the ship's galley. Master Chief Reeves stepped forward. What's our approach, ma'am? Fast rope insertion from helicopters at 0430 hours before dawn breaks. Team Alpha, led by Lieutenant Morrison, will secure the bridge and engine room. Team Bravo, which I'll lead personally, will extract the hostages from the galley. Team Charlie remains on standby for air support and emergency extraction. Sarah noticed the quick glances exchanged around the room. It wasn't common for commanders to lead frontline operations. But Sarah hadn't gotten to her position by sitting behind a desk during critical missions. Patterson, who had been assigned to her team after his exceptional performance over the past 2 months, raised his hand. Rules of engagement, ma'am? Standard hostage rescue protocols. Lethal force is authorized to protect American lives. However, I want everyone clear on this. We save lives first. That includes the pirates, if possible. These are likely young men forced into this life by poverty and desperation. If they surrender, we take them alive. If they resist, we neutralize them. Questions? Rodriguez spoke up. Ma'am, the weather report shows rough seas. That's going to make the insertion challenging. Agreed. Which is why we're going in before conditions worsen. We have a 4-hour window. After that, winds pick up to 30 knots and the operation becomes significantly more dangerous. Sarah looked around the room. I know this is your first real-world operation under my command. Some of you are still getting to know me, still building trust. So let me be clear about my priorities. Mission success means everyone comes home alive. Our team, the hostages, and if possible, even the pirates. We're not here to rack up a body count. We're here to save lives and resolve a crisis. Understood? Yes, ma'am. The team responded. The next hour was a controlled chaos of preparation. Equipment checks, weapons inspections, communications tests. Sarah moved through the preparations with practiced efficiency, checking on each team member, answering questions, providing reassurance where needed. In the armory, she found Morrison helping Chen with his vest adjustment. The two men had developed a strong working relationship after their confrontation months ago. Morrison looked up as she approached. Ma'am, team's ready. We won't let you down. I know you won't. Sarah checked her own equipment one final time. Morrison, you've got the most dangerous job tonight. That bridge is going to be defended. I need you thinking 3 steps ahead. Always do, ma'am. Morrison paused. Can I say something off the record? Go ahead. When you first took command, I had doubts. I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth. These past 2 months, you've proven every one of those doubts wrong. You're the best commander I've served under, and I'm honored to be on this mission with you. Sarah met his eyes. Thank you, Morrison. That means a lot. She clapped him on the shoulder. Now let's go bring those people home. At Aero 4:15 hours, 2 MH-60 helicopters lifted off from the USS Boxer, carrying Sarah's team toward the Meridian Star. The night was dark with only starlight to see by. Sarah sat near the open door, feeling the familiar rush of pre-mission adrenaline. Patterson sat across from her, looking focused but calm. Chen and Rodriguez flanked him, all three checking their weapons for the 100th time. Hayes and Miller were in the second helicopter with Morrison's team. 5 minutes. The crew chief shouted over the rotor noise. Sarah activated her communication system. All teams comms check. One by one, each team member confirmed their equipment was functioning. The helicopter began its approach, flying low and fast over the dark water. In the distance, Sarah could see the Meridian Star, its lights creating a small island of illumination in the vast darkness. 2 minutes. Prepare for insertion. Sarah stood gripping the fast rope with gloved hands. The helicopter flared, coming to a hover above the ship's deck. Below, she could see figures moving, pirates alerted by the sound of the helicopters. Go, go, go. Sarah dropped onto the rope, sliding down with controlled speed. Her boots hit the deck, and she immediately moved to cover, weapon up. Patterson landed beside her, then Chen and Rodriguez. The team spread out, moving with precision toward their objective. Gunfire erupted from the bridge. Morrison's team was engaged. Sarah heard his calm voice over the radio. Team Alpha, contact. 3 targets on the bridge. Engaging. Team Bravo moving to objective, Sarah reported, leading her team toward the galley entrance. They moved quickly but carefully, clearing corners, watching for threats. A pirate emerged from a doorway ahead. Sarah had him in her sights in an instant. Drop your weapon, she shouted in Arabic, one of 6 languages she spoke fluently. The young man, barely 20 years old, looked terrified. His rifle wavered. For a moment, Sarah thought he would shoot. Then his weapon clattered to the deck and his hand shot up. Chen, secure him, Sarah ordered, already moving past. The hostages were her priority. They reached the galley door. Sarah could hear voices inside, frightened, speaking multiple languages. She signaled her team, then kicked the door open, moving inside with her weapon raised. American military. Everybody down. The scene inside was chaos. 23 crew members were crowded into a space meant for 12. 3 more pirates stood guard, their weapons trained on the hostages. Sarah's team had them covered from multiple angles. Drop your weapons now, Sarah commanded in Arabic. The pirates looked at each other, calculating their chances. Sarah could see the decision forming. They were going to fight. Don't do it, she said, her voice steady. You're outgunned and surrounded. Put down your weapons and nobody has to die tonight. The oldest pirate, probably in his early 30s, spoke in broken English. You kill us anyway. No, you surrender, you go to trial, you serve time, but you live. You fight, you die. Your choice. You have 3 seconds. The tension in the room was crushing. Sarah's finger rested lightly on her trigger. She could take all 3 pirates down before they could aim, but she didn't want to. These were desperate young men, not hardened terrorists. 1, 2. The oldest pirate lowered his weapon. The others followed. Sarah's team moved in immediately, securing them quickly but not roughly. Hostages remain calm. We're here to take you home. Anyone injured? A man who appeared to be the captain raised his hand. 2 crew members have injuries. Nothing life-threatening, but they need medical attention. We'll get them care. Sarah activated her radio. Team Bravo, objective secure. 23 hostages safe, 3 pirates in custody. Status of Team Alpha? Morrison's voice came back, slightly breathless. Bridge secure, ma'am. 4 pirates in custody. No casualties either side. We're good here. Excellent work. Prepare for extraction. Command, this is Bravo 1. Mission successful. All hostages accounted for and safe. 8 pirates in custody, requesting medical evacuation for 2 injured crew members. The response from the USS Boxer was immediate. Bravo 1 outstanding. Extraction birds inbound. ETA 10 minutes. Sarah looked around the galley at the frightened but relieved faces of the crew members. The captain approached her, his eyes filled with tears. Thank you, he said simply. We didn't think help would come in time. That's what we're here for, sir. Let's get you and your crew home to your families. 3 weeks after the Meridian Star rescue, Sarah found herself once again in her office, but the atmosphere had changed completely. News of the successful mission had spread throughout the naval special warfare community. The operation had been textbook perfect. 0 casualties, all hostages rescued, pirates taken alive for prosecution. It was the kind of mission that became a case study in military academies. But Sarah knew the real victory wasn't the mission itself. It was what had happened in the months leading up to it. The culture shift, the growth, the team building. That was the foundation that made the mission successful. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Enter. Patterson, Rodriguez, Chen, Miller, and Hayes filed in. They had requested this meeting, but Sarah didn't know why. Their training module on unconscious bias had been a huge success, already being implemented across multiple SEAL training facilities. Ma'am, we wanted to talk to you about something, Patterson began. He looked nervous, which was unusual for him now. The confident young man who had confronted her in the shower room had evolved into a thoughtful, capable operator who understood the weight of leadership. Go ahead, Sarah said, gesturing for them to sit. Rodriguez pulled out a folder. We've been working on something over the past few weeks. It started as a personal project, but it grew into something bigger. He opened the folder and pulled out a detailed proposal. We want to establish a mentorship program, pairing experienced operators with new candidates, but with a focus on more than just technical skills, teaching them about leadership, cultural awareness, ethical decision-making. Sarah took the proposal and began reading. It was comprehensive, well-researched, and showed a level of insight that impressed her. This is excellent work. What inspired it? Chen spoke up. You did, ma'am. The way you handled us after the shower room incident. You could have destroyed our careers, but instead you used it as a teaching moment. We learned more from that experience than from any training manual. We want to create a system where that kind of learning is intentional, not accidental. Hayes added, We've also been talking to other operators about their experiences. A lot of them have stories similar to ours, moments where they made assumptions, had biases they didn't realize, made mistakes that could have been prevented with better mentorship. We think this program could make a real difference, Miller said, not just in preventing incidents, but in creating better leaders overall. Sarah set down the proposal, feeling a swell of pride. This is outstanding. You've identified a real need and proposed a practical solution. How can I help? We need command approval to pilot the program, Patterson explained. We want to start here with our unit, and if it works, expand it to other SEAL teams. You have my full support, Sarah said immediately. In fact, I want to take this further. I'm going to recommend this to the Special Warfare Command. This could become a standard part of SEAL training. The 5 men exchanged excited glances. Rodriguez said, Ma'am, there's something else. We want you to be the senior advisor for the program. We need someone with command experience who understands both the tactical side and the human side of operations. Sarah was touched. I'd be honored. But this is your program. You developed it, you own it. I'll support and advise, but the success belongs to you. With respect, ma'am, we wouldn't be here without what you taught us, Chen said. This program exists because you showed us a different way of leading." Before Sarah could respond, Master Chief Reeves knocked and entered. "Ma'am, sorry to interrupt, but you have a visitor. Admiral Williams is here." Sarah stood immediately. Admiral Williams was the commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, her direct superior. "Show him in, Master Chief." Admiral Williams entered the office, and everyone snapped to attention. He was a distinguished man in his late 50s with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in special operations. "At ease," he said, his eyes sweeping the room. "Commander Mitchell, I'm not interrupting anything important, am I?" "Just a program proposal meeting, sir." "What brings you to Coronado?" "You do, Commander." Williams pulled out a folder of his own. "I've been reviewing the reports from the Meridian Star operation. Flawless execution. 0 casualties, perfect coordination between teams. The hostages are safely home, and we even managed to take the pirates alive, which has given us valuable intelligence on their network." "Thank you, sir. It was a team effort." "I know it was. And I've been hearing a lot about your team lately." Williams glanced at the 5 men. "Word is that Commander Mitchell here is running one of the most effective units in naval special warfare. Low friction, high performance, innovative training approaches. Is that accurate?" Patterson spoke up. "Yes, sir. Commander Mitchell has transformed this unit." Williams nodded. "Good to hear from the operators themselves." He turned back to Sarah. "Commander, I'm here to offer you a promotion and a new assignment. We want you to take over Special Warfare Training Command. You'd be responsible for overseeing all SEAL training programs, implementing new methodologies, and shaping the next generation of operators." Sarah felt the weight of the offer. It was a significant promotion, a career-defining opportunity, but it would mean leaving her current command, leaving the team she had built. "Sir, that's an incredible honor, but I need to think about it. This team will thrive with or without you because you've built something sustainable." Williams interrupted gently. "That's the mark of a great leader, Commander. You don't create dependency. You create capability. These men can carry on without you because you taught them how." Sarah looked at Patterson, Rodriguez, Chen, Miller, and Hayes. She saw the understanding in their eyes. They knew she had to take this opportunity. "If I accept, sir, I have one condition," Sarah said. Williams raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "These 5 operators come with me as part of my staff. They've developed a mentorship program that I believe should be implemented across all SEAL training. They're the ones who should oversee its rollout." Williams looked at the 5 men with renewed interest. "Is that so? Tell me about this program." For the next 20 minutes, Patterson, Rodriguez, Chen, Miller, and Hayes presented their proposal to the Admiral. Sarah watched with pride as they articulated their vision, answered questions, and demonstrated the depth of thought they had put into the program. When they finished, Williams was nodding. "Impressive. Very impressive. Commander Mitchell, you've not only led successful missions, but you've developed future leaders. That's exactly what we need at Training Command." He turned to the 5 men. "If you're willing to take on this assignment, you're approved to join Commander Mitchell's staff." After the Admiral left, the office erupted in excited conversation. Sarah held up her hand for quiet. "Before we celebrate, I want to make something clear. This isn't about me getting promoted. This is about an opportunity to make systemic change, to influence how we train and develop every SEAL who comes through the pipeline. That's a huge responsibility." "We understand, ma'am," Patterson said. "That's why we want to be part of it." Sarah smiled. "Then let's get to work. We have a lot to do before we transfer to Training Command." As evening fell and her team finally left, Sarah stood alone in her office one last time. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The incident in the shower room that could have ended badly. The confrontations, the teaching moments, the successful mission. It had all led to this opportunity to make a broader impact. She walked to the window and looked out at the training grounds. Tomorrow, new candidates would arrive, beginning their journey to become SEALs. Some would succeed, some would fail. But if Sarah and her team did their job right, all of them would learn lessons that went beyond physical training. They would learn about leadership, about bias, about making ethical decisions under pressure. Sarah picked up her phone and called her sister. "Hey, it's me. I have some news. I got promoted." "Yes, seriously. I know Mom's going to cry. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Remember when you told me about the discrimination you faced in engineering school? How you almost quit because people assumed you didn't belong there? I'm working on a training program and I'd love your input." As she talked with her sister, Sarah realized that the story of her command wasn't really about her. It was about transformation, about how one incident could become a catalyst for change, about how leaders could choose punishment or education, division or unity, maintenance of the status quo or evolution towards something better. The woman who had stood in that shower room 3 months ago, wrapped in a towel and facing 5 ignorant young men, had become more than just their commander. She had become their teacher, their mentor, their example, and in teaching them, she had been reminded of the lessons she had learned throughout her own career. Sarah thought about the instructor who had pulled her aside years ago, who had told her that pride was just another word for assumption. She wished she could tell him about this moment, about how his words had rippled forward through time, influencing not just her career but the careers of countless others. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the best leaders were those who created ripples that extended far beyond their immediate presence. Maybe the measure of true leadership wasn't the missions you led or the awards you received, but the positive changes you inspired in others. As Sarah locked her office door for the last time, she felt a sense of completion. This chapter of her career was ending, but a new one was beginning. The 5 men who had once confronted her in ignorance were now her partners in transformation. The unit that had once harbored unconscious biases was now a model of inclusive excellence. The journey wasn't over. There would be new challenges at training command, new obstacles to overcome, new minds to shape. But Sarah was ready. She had proven that change was possible, that people could grow, that leadership meant more than just executing missions successfully. She walked out into the evening air, breathing in the salt breeze from the ocean. Somewhere out there, future SEALs were living their lives, not yet knowing they would one day arrive at training facilities that had been shaped by the lessons learned in a shower room confrontation. And Sarah Mitchell, the woman who had once stood bare and vulnerable facing ignorance, now stood ready to transform an entire system. Because that's what real leaders did. They didn't just overcome challenges. They used those challenges to build something better for everyone who came after them. The lights of Coronado twinkled in the distance as Sarah walked toward her quarters, already planning the first changes she would implement at training command. The story that began with confrontation was ending with collaboration. The cycle of bias and assumption was being replaced with a culture of awareness and growth, and it all started in a shower room, with a woman who refused to be anything less than she had earned the right to be.